Have you ever noticed what really happens when you pull back? Not with anger, not with a scene, just silence. Suddenly the atmosphere changes. The person on the other side feels it, not immediately in words, but in weight. They sense something is missing. A presence. Your presence. And where there used to be noise, the calls, the explanations, the justifications, now there is only quiet, a void. And in that void something powerful begins, because withdrawal isn't just absence, it's a message, a shift, a mirror held up to those who once felt in control of the dynamic. And when that mirror appears, people panic, they reflect, they replay the last things they said, the way they acted. They question if maybe this time they went too far. This is the hidden power of stepping back. It doesn't scream, it doesn't fight, it simply removes your energy and makes others face their own. And then comes silence. Not the kind that's empty, the kind that echoes. Silence is often misunderstood. They say it's weakness, they say it's passive. The truth is, silence, when chosen consciously, is one of the loudest things in the room. It draws attention without trying. It makes people lean in, guess, wonder. And in their discomfort they start to speak, revealing more than they intended. Because people rush to fill a silence that wasn't theirs to break. That's the secret. You didn't raise your voice, and you shifted the entire room. Now listen closely. Withdrawing isn't pouting. It's not punishment. It's not leaving the table in rage. That's reaction. That's what they expect. But strategic retreat? That's different. It's calm, controlled, chosen. It's stepping back with grace, not to hurt them, but to protect you. You don't react. You observe. You don't explode. You recenter. You don't lose control. You gain it. And when you master this balance, the dance between silence and presence, you stop playing their game. You stop being a pawn in their drama. You stop answering every poke, every test, every provocation. You step into a pause, and in that pause, you rise. Because the one who doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't react. That's the one who holds the real power, even if no one can explain why. There's a quiet danger in always being there, always answering, always listening, always comforting. At first, it feels like love, like loyalty, like the right thing to do. But then something shifts. People stop noticing your effort. They stop valuing your presence, because it's always there. And when something is always there, it stops feeling special. It becomes expected, assumed, taken for granted. You start as a gift, but over time you become background noise. Not because you changed, but because they stopped paying attention. This is the trap of emotional availability without limits. They know you'll answer at 2 a.m. They know you'll drop everything, again, even if they've given you nothing in return. And without even realizing it, you become a crutch, not a partner, not a friend, a convenience. They lean on you when it suits them, and vanish when they're satisfied. And here's where it gets darker. This is where manipulation sneaks in quietly. If someone knows you'll always soothe their anxiety, they'll stop learning to calm themselves. If they know you'll always forgive, they'll stop respecting your boundaries. Because why change? When they know you'll stay the same, what once was kindness becomes a pattern. What once was love becomes labour. And here's the hardest part. They don't even see it. Because you've made it too easy. But this isn't about becoming cold. It's not about shutting your heart. It's about discernment. It's about knowing when to hold space and when to step back. Because some people only grow when they're forced to sit with the silence you once filled. When you stop rescuing, stop explaining, stop rushing in to fix what they keep breaking. That's when they realise. That's when they feel your absence. And maybe, just maybe, that's when they begin to see your true worth. Your presence should be earned, not expected. Your care should be valued, not consumed. And when you step back, when you say no, you're not abandoning them, you're choosing you. And that choice, that's not selfish, that's sacred. Every time you react, you lose a piece of yourself. Every time you get drawn into someone else's drama, every time you defend yourself or explain your worth over and over, you're giving away something precious, something you might not even notice until you're completely drained. It's not the explosive fights that wear you down. It's the constant subtle pulls on your energy, the small demands, the little moments of doubt, the never-ending emotional expectations. You reassure them when they question you. You calm them when they're upset. You explain, again and again, why you're coming from a good place. Each time you chip away at yourself. What's left isn't peace. It isn't connection. It's just exhaustion. And here's the truth. This is what people mistake for care. This is the fatigue that's often mistaken for being supportive. But in reality, it's just wear and tear. It's the toll of overextending yourself in places where your effort isn't valued, where your care isn't returned. And you start to wonder, why do you feel empty when you're around certain people? Why do you have nothing left for yourself? The problem isn't that you're giving, it's that you're giving without boundaries. You react when silence would have kept you safe. You explain when walking away would have preserved your peace. You try to manage emotions that aren't yours to manage, and in doing so, you end up drained. Protecting your energy means knowing when to stop. It means realizing not every comment deserves a response, not every conflict needs your involvement, and not every emotion in your orbit is your responsibility. When you hold on to your energy, you're not being selfish. You're practicing survival. From that place of clarity and calm, you regain the strength you thought was gone forever. Because when you protect what's yours, you restore what was taken. When you become predictable, you become vulnerable. When people know exactly how you'll react, when they know which buttons to press, they don't need to force you. They simply need to wait. Guilt, anger, anxiety. They can steer your behavior without lifting a finger. They can control you by watching your reactions, by pushing the right triggers. Emotional manipulation is subtle. It often begins with a small comment, a seemingly innocent remark that makes you feel guilty, or a passive-aggressive jab designed to stir your anger. Maybe it's the sudden withdrawal of affection, a tactic to provoke your fear of abandonment, and each time you react, you confirm the power they hold over you. They learn your patterns. When they push, you pull. When they disappear, you chase. When they criticize, you explain. It becomes a loop, a cycle you're trapped in without realizing it's your own reactions that keep it going. But the most dangerous part isn't their manipulation, it's your automatic response. Because over time, you stop noticing the pattern. You feel anxious when they pull away. You rush to fix things when they're upset. You internalize their disapproval as your failure. They don't need chains. They don't need to command you. They just need your predictability. Breaking the cycle starts with disrupting your own reactions. Instead of arguing, you go silent. Instead of chasing, you stay still. Instead of explaining yourself endlessly, you let the discomfort linger in the air, and in that silence, they lose their grip. The less predictable you are, the harder it is for someone to control you, not because you've become cold or indifferent, but because you've learned that peace isn't something you beg for. It's something you hold within yourself, and once they realize they can't move you like a pawn on their board, the entire game shifts. Individuation is the quiet, powerful process of becoming yourself, not the version others expect or demand, but the version that's been waiting underneath the roles you've played. Carl Jung called it the path to wholeness. It's a journey where you integrate the parts of you that were once hidden, rejected, or split off. It's not about perfection. It's not about reaching some flawless ideal. It's about becoming real or authentic in your thoughts, your desires, your fears. It's about peeling back the projections you've placed on others and the projections they've placed on you. You stop being the savior, the victim, the people pleaser, or the rebel just for rebellion's sake. You become someone who knows what you stand for, what you value, and what you're willing to walk away from. Individuation demands that you face both the light and the shadow within you. You stop pretending to be only good, only strong, only rational. You allow yourself to be vulnerable, flawed, emotional. And in doing that, you become more whole. It's uncomfortable because it shatters the illusions you've held on to. But with that discomfort comes freedom. As you mature, psychologically, spiritually, you begin to detach from the need for external validation. The hunger for constant approval fades. You no longer shapeshift to fit in, nor do you rebel just to stand out. Instead, you move from a center that feels steady, regardless of how others respond. The most beautiful part of individuation is that it naturally creates independence. Not isolation, but the kind of independence where connection becomes a choice, not a survival strategy. You no longer grasp or cling to people to fill the gaps inside you. You bring a full self to the table, and that changes the quality of every relationship in your life. When your sense of worth is tied to how available you are for others, you lose sight of your own value. You start to believe that your worth comes from being there, emotionally, physically, psychologically, whenever someone calls on you. The more you give, the more they take, and you begin to confuse self-worth with being needed. But here's the harsh truth. Being always available doesn't make you valuable. It makes you predictable. It makes you dispensable. The more you respond to the needs of others without hesitation, the less people see you as a unique individual with your own needs. Instead, you become a resource, a filler in their lives, someone who exists only to meet their demands. This cycle of giving and seeking approval is draining. You try to prove your worth by being there for others, thinking that if you just give enough, they will love you more, need you more. But the reality is, the more you make yourself available, the more your self-esteem becomes tied to others' fleeting needs and opinions. When you base your self-worth on external validation, you give away your power. The approval you seek becomes a form of control, a way for others to manage you. Your emotional availability becomes a transaction. You provide something in exchange for attention, love, or a momentary feeling of significance. But this cycle is empty. It doesn't nourish your soul. It keeps you trapped in a constant state of uncertainty, never knowing if what you're offering is truly appreciated or just taken for granted. True self-worth comes from within. It comes from understanding that your value isn't dependent on being available at all times. It's not about how much you can give or how much you can do for others. It's about recognizing that your presence, your energy, your boundaries, those are the things that make you worthy. When you stop seeking validation through availability, you start building an unshakable sense of self. The persona is the mask we wear to fit into the world, to gain acceptance, to be loved. It's the version of ourselves that we present to others, carefully curated, polished, controlled. A version designed to keep us safe in social circles, in relationships, in environments where vulnerability might seem like a threat. This persona often hides our true self, our raw emotions, and the parts of us we've been conditioned to believe are unworthy or undesirable. But here's the thing. The persona is not who we really are. It's a construct, a performance. It is shaped by what we think others want to see and what we think we need to do to belong. The more we wear this mask, the more disconnected we become from our true feelings. We start to suppress emotions because we're afraid they might disrupt the social harmony we've worked so hard to create. Anger, sadness, frustration. These feelings aren't convenient when you're trying to maintain an image of someone who has it all together. So, we silence them. But by masking our true emotions, we lose something crucial: authenticity. We start to lose touch with who we really are beneath the surface. The persona becomes a barrier between us and the world, a wall that prevents true connection. Instead of interacting from a place of honesty and vulnerability, we interact from a place of fear, of trying to control how others perceive us. We live in constant performance, never fully able to show up as our true selves, always hiding behind the mask of who we think we should be. Carl Jung said that the persona is necessary for survival in society, but when we identify too strongly with it, when we forget that it's just a mask, we become imprisoned by it. We stop living authentically, and in doing so, we begin to lose our sense of self. The real work, the work of individuation, comes when we learn to drop the mask and let the world see us for who we truly are, raw, unfiltered, vulnerable. Because only then can we live in alignment with our true self and experience genuine connection with others. Setting psychological boundaries is about protecting our mental and emotional well-being, giving ourselves permission to say no when something isn't in alignment with our needs. It's not about being selfish. It's about being self-aware enough to recognize when something or someone is draining our energy or compromising our peace. Too often, we overextend ourselves because we fear disappointing others or being seen as unkind. We say yes when we mean no, and over time this erodes our sense of self, leaving us exhausted and resentful. Boundaries are essential for maintaining balance in our lives. They're the invisible lines that define where we end and others begin, where we decide what we are and aren't willing to tolerate. When we set these limits, we're essentially telling ourselves that our feelings, needs and time are valuable, and we're not going to let anyone take that for granted. This is a form of self-respect, and it's something we all need to practice. Saying no without guilt is one of the most freeing things you can do for your emotional health. It doesn't mean we're being unkind or unhelpful, it simply means we recognise our own limits and are no longer willing to sacrifice our well-being for the comfort of others. It's hard at first because we're conditioned to please, to avoid conflict, but over time, we learn that setting boundaries doesn't lead to rejection. It actually leads to more authentic connections because we show up as our true selves, not as people who are overextended and overwhelmed. Psychological boundaries aren't just about saying no to others, they're also about saying no to ourselves. We need to recognise when we're pushing ourselves too hard, when we're accepting too much from the world, or when we're compromising our values to fit in. The key is to get comfortable with discomfort. The initial resistance we feel when setting a boundary is often rooted in fear of conflict, fear of rejection. But once we begin to honour our boundaries, we realise that they are the foundation of healthy relationships and a peaceful mind. Becoming a mystery is one of the most powerful ways to shift how you are perceived and engage with the world around you. When you become unpredictable, when you embrace a sense of accessibility that's intentionally limited, you create an aura of power that others cannot easily define or control. This isn't about being elusive just for the sake of it. It's about recognizing that too much openness, too much availability can diminish your power and give others the upper hand. Mystery, when wielded correctly, becomes your strength. Turning unpredictability into personal power involves withdrawing from the constant need to be available, to explain yourself, or to give every detail of your life away. The more consistent and predictable you are, the more others can anticipate your actions, manipulate your responses, and use your patterns to their advantage. But when you pull back and become less predictable, others are left in a state of curiosity and uncertainty. They no longer know what to expect from you, and this creates an underlying tension. That tension isn't uncomfortable for you. It gives you control. This shift in perception happens because mystery naturally causes others to invest energy into figuring you out, to seek the answers you're withholding. The less you reveal about yourself, the more your actions, your words, your movements are seen as valuable. Mystery triggers curiosity, and curiosity is powerful. People begin to project their own interpretations, imagining what you might be thinking or feeling, and this puts them on the defensive. When people are forced to figure you out, they stop focusing on their own agenda and start focusing on yours. Using mystery as a psychological tool doesn't require manipulation. It's about self-preservation. It's about realizing that too much exposure creates vulnerability. By being inaccessible, you create space for your own autonomy, your own sovereignty. You protect your energy, your time, and your emotional space. And in doing so, you maintain the upper hand in interactions. You become a force that others must approach carefully, with intention, and this is where your real power lies. When you master the art of becoming a mystery, you stop being a character in others' narratives and begin to write your own. From the moment we're born, society begins to imprint certain messages about our value and our place in the world. One of the most pervasive and subtle lessons we learn is that our worth is often measured by how helpful, accommodating, and available we are to others. This message is typically passed down from parents, teachers, and even peers who praise us for being good when we follow the rules, assist others, and put the needs of those around us before our own. While this behaviour is often seen as virtuous, it comes with an inherent cost. As children, we internalise the belief that being helpful equals being valuable. Parents encourage us to share, to be kind, to help with chores, and to be the good kid who never causes trouble. The more we give of ourselves, the more approval and praise we receive. This external validation reinforces the idea that our worth is tied to what we do for others. In fact, many of us are unknowingly conditioned to tie our sense of self-worth to how much we can give or how much others rely on us. Over time, this idea of helpfulness becomes deeply ingrained in our psychological makeup. We begin to associate being available and constantly serving the needs of others with being valuable and good. It's not just about the small everyday tasks, but about the bigger, more profound ways in which we become emotionally and psychologically available to others. We are taught to suppress our own needs, desires, and boundaries in favour of being the one who is always there for everyone else. In essence, we are taught that our purpose is to be of service to others, a concept that can be deeply ingrained in cultural, familial, and even religious values. However, this form of conditioning creates a double-edged sword. On one hand, we're praised for our helpfulness, making us feel seen, validated, and appreciated. But on the other hand, the more we give, the more we find ourselves feeling drained, empty, and sometimes even resentful. We often feel obligated to help others, not because we truly want to, but because we've been conditioned to believe that our value lies in being useful, in being needed. When we don't receive the validation or recognition we expect in return, we feel lost or unappreciated, as if we've somehow failed to meet the unspoken expectations set by society or ourselves. This dependency on others' validation becomes a cycle that's difficult to break. The more we seek approval, the more we attach our sense of worth to external factors. We become emotionally dependent on others' responses to us, measuring our value based on their reactions. This creates a dynamic in which we are constantly trying to prove our worth through actions, rather than recognizing that our value as individuals is inherent and not contingent upon what others think or say about us. Moreover, this conditioning doesn't just impact our relationships with others, but also how we view ourselves. If we're constantly seeking approval from others, we begin to lose sight of who we truly are and what we truly want. We become defined by the roles we play for others rather than our authentic selves. We might find ourselves sacrificing our time, energy, and resources to please others, but in the process we neglect our own needs. This can lead to a deep sense of emotional exhaustion, burnout, and confusion, as we realize that no matter how much we give, we are never truly fulfilled. The desire for approval becomes a constant undercurrent in our lives, shaping our actions, decisions, and even our self-concept. We feel incomplete unless we are being acknowledged for our efforts, and this often leads us to overextend ourselves in relationships, at work, or in social situations. We might say yes when we want to say no because we fear rejection or disapproval. We may agree to take on more responsibilities, even when we're already overwhelmed, because we associate our self-worth with how much we can do for others. Breaking free from this conditioning requires a shift in perspective. It begins with understanding that our value is not determined by how much we give or how helpful we are. True self-worth comes from within, from the recognition that we are valuable simply because we exist, not because of what we do for others. This shift can be challenging, as it often goes against years of conditioning and societal expectations. However, the journey towards self-realization and autonomy involves learning to value ourselves independently of external approval. It means setting boundaries, saying no when necessary, and understanding that we do not have to be available at all times to prove our worth. As we begin to disentangle our sense of self-worth from the need for external validation, we start to reclaim our personal power. We learn to prioritize our own needs, desires, and well-being. We recognize that being helpful should be a choice, not an obligation. In doing so, we create space for authentic connections that are based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than a transactional exchange of validation. Ultimately, the process of unlearning these deeply ingrained cultural and familial messages is liberating. It allows us to step into our true selves, free from the pressure of constantly seeking external validation. We become more confident in our own worth, and as a result, we become more emotionally resilient, healthier, and more connected to the essence of who we truly are.